And that's how Coolnomics came to be, because I discovered across my career, working from big brands to smaller brands, realized, gosh, there's a real relationship between what is going on socially, culturally, economically, environmentally, politically, and that impacts the way people buy things, run their companies, the way they feel in the world, and it changes their behavior in real time. So Coolnomics, came to life, which is a whole body of work exploring the relationship between culture and economics. Some things are really cool but don't make any money, and some things aren't very cool but they make a bunch of money. And I think there's a really interesting relationship between those two things. And as we know, any great company that succeeds in market gets this right, works with the cultural zeitgeist, with the cultural flywheel. Lego, A24, Netflix, Crocs, Stanley Cup, they're all examples.
Are you feeling lost in your career, or you want to have a greater impact but you don't know where to start? Welcome to Kinda Planned, the podcast where we help you unlock the opportunities that you can't plan for. Through engaging conversations with expert guests, we help you unlock the mindsets, strategies, and tools that you need to build the career of your dreams. So subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Alex Cutterford, and let's take a moment to unlock your next opportunity. So today I'm joined by Robyn Wilson. She is the CEO of Superora Strategy Studio, and I'm really excited to have you on today, hear a bit about your career journey, and all that you do. You're the founder of Coolnomics, which we're going to unpack today, understand what that is. But Robyn, thanks so much for being on with me today.
Thanks for having me, Alex. Great to see you this morning.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to get in. Would you be able to introduce yourself to our listeners and maybe share a bit about your career journey and what's led you to what you're doing today?
Sure, absolutely. So great to see everyone this morning. I know that we're all in different parts of our careers. I've had a 20-year career now, working across arts, health, technology, tourism, from big brands to smaller brands. I was an artist back in the day. I worked for Ministry of Sound, designing parties for them in the early 2000s, part of the rave scene, and gone on the journey working to new levels of seniority, and now I have an MBA, and now I work in the management consulting space, so helping companies both make money and leverage the cultural zeitgeist. And that's how Coolnomics came to be, because I discovered across my career, working from big brands to smaller brands, realized, gosh, there's a real relationship between what is going on socially, culturally, economically, environmentally, politically, and that impacts the way people buy things, run their companies, the way they feel in the world, and it changes their behavior in real time. So Coolnomics, came to life, which is a whole body of work exploring the relationship between culture and economics. Some things are really cool but don't make any money, and some things aren't very cool but they make a bunch of money. And I think there's a really interesting relationship between those two things. And as we know, any great company that succeeds in market gets this right, works with the cultural zeitgeist, with the cultural flywheel. Lego, A24, Netflix, Crocs, Stanley Cup, they're all examples of a company working with its product design. So we're working on a product level, not just on a marketing level. We're on an executive level, influencing what the business does in the world and helping it to leverage where the world is heading.
I was just having a conversation with my boss the other day, and we were, and he goes, "What would you do if you suddenly won $1 million?" And we're talking about how, in all honesty, we'd probably just pay off the house and do that. But then we were talking about business ideas and stuff, and he was talking about his mate who was saying if he was ever going to buy a business, he would buy a news agency because news is never going to go out of fashion. And we're like, yeah, news might not go out of fashion, but the internet's going to come along and totally shake up that industry and how people get their news. And so that's what a real blaringly obvious example of what you're talking about, of just how a culture shifts because of a shift in an economic situation, and technology emerges that just completely flips an industry on its head, and it's all in this space of how culture and the economy and stuff is changing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're seeing it on a macro and quite intense level right now with the US, with the tariffs, and we're seeing this massive ripple effect. We're seeing red right across the stock market itself, and then these sudden pings, from a sudden bounce back in the market with a bogus tweet from someone saying the tariffs were going to be suspended for 90 days and then discovering that wasn't correct. So it just shows just how sensitive the markets are, and that's on a macro level. But that also comes down to the micro level on an individual business level. What is going on around you, and how can you leverage the changes in the market? It's more crucial than ever now, isn't it, Alex? Things are changing on a dime. It's a really tight, big time in the market, which means there's a lot of opportunity in the way that things are changing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is the zeitgeist?
Sure, great question. So the word zeitgeist represents the spirit of our times. So any era from any moment in the world's existence, you would probably talk about it in a more contemporary setting, there is a zeitgeist. What is going on with politics at the time, what is going on with the economy, what is going on with culture, the environment. And that gives us, and the median point, that's why there's a bit of instinct when you're talking about the zeitgeist, because it's not all on the page. We certainly have a certain amount of data that tells us where the world is at any point in time, our news headlines, our comment sections on social media, people's behaviors in everyday life. But there's also this underlying current that really represents what the zeitgeist is, and it can be hard to put into singular words. That's why I think this body of work, Coolnomics, now's the time for this to come to life, to help us articulate what is going on so we can run better companies that are cooler and commercially effective. For me, it's not one or the other. It's not, something is cool and then something makes money. I mean, the ideal, we all know, is when those two things come together. So the zeitgeist is a really meaty median point that tells us what people are thinking, feeling, doing, and being at any stage, and then that would tell us what we want to do with our marketing or our business.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and the reason I asked him what we were talking about before we jumped on was, yes, with my audience and people that are just trying to build their career, I think having this understanding of this larger ecosystem that we all exist within, and all of these different pieces affect how our career opportunities might unfold and where we find our place within it, and the opportunities that exist, the challenges that exist. They're not just magically there. They're there for a reason, and it's all these different moving pieces of politics and culture and economics and world COVID flu. Oh, I was going to call it flu. What's it called? It's no longer a pandemic. It's an endemic now. But like global pandemics taking over, and all of these things influence how your career unfolds. And so it's really good, I think, to have that understanding.
Yeah.
So one of, I guess, the things that I'm thinking through is, how does shifting culture impact the world of work? What are some of the shifts that I guess you've seen that might be shifting the way that we work?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually working with a workplace design client at the moment, one of the big property developers, talking about the role of the workplace now in a tangible. Well, I guess that conversation starts in a tangible sense. How do we need to be designing workspaces now for the modern employee? But I think we find ourselves very quickly also in a sensory, philosophical, and a behavioral space as well. So I go straight away to the human-centered design principles, right? So the way that the values in the way that we approach work are changing. We're the way that we want to be rewarded is changing. We want to be an active participant. The ways that intelligence is changing as well, Alex, right? Like, we're moving into a hybrid intelligence future now, where the role of the machine and the human are in the same picture. And it's going to be about understanding how those two things come together in a really effective way, so that we're co-creators with technology, not as a replacement, is changing the entire way that we consider what is our work and how do we perform best. So if we want happy employees who are doing the best work of their careers, we have really tight-knit, solid cultures where people are challenging each other as well as respecting each other, then we need to think about how would the workplace be designed in a way that enables that. Do we need to have spaces where people can have quiet time as well as open spaces for collaboration, and a lot more flexibility, I would say, with the with the occurrence of COVID, it really shifted the way that we consider our work. We've come from a tradition of the idea of hybrid work or remote work was not even possible. It felt like such a distant possibility, but COVID, shifted that technology forward. And in that case, it wasn't just technology, right? Behavior changed. Therefore, the way that people work and work in the best ways has changed. So I think people want more meaning in what they do. They want more purpose. They also want the right level. We found this in our resonance report for 2025 that we've just released, that people are wanting, on the behavioral level, people are wanting the right balance between experiences, environments, and community moments that are both comforting and stimulating, not one or the other. So I think we need to think about the way that we develop our work days, our work environments, and the way that we support employees and manage and support their performance to reach the level of excellence that they want to. It's much more human-centered than ever, and it's about holding simultaneous truths, that it's not one or the other. We're human beings who are multifaceted, and we need both. We need comfort and stimulation. We need individual time to work on deeper work in our professions, as well as collective collaborative time with the other people on our teams. So there's some of the things I'm seeing coming through in terms of
it's really
changing
interesting.
work. Yeah.
So one of the things that I started grappling with, so I have this big drive to have an impact through my career, and I really want to have an impact. And then I really started challenging myself on what does it mean to have impact, and what is positive impact and stuff, and what is value. And so these were some of the questions that I've sort of been mulling over and don't necessarily have a clear answer that I've come to yet, but I'm at a bit more peace with it, because it's a bit unsettling as well when you start really challenging.
Yeah, these are
some
big
of these
questions.
things, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that had me thinking was, and you hear that a bit, like particularly younger generations are really looking for meaning and purpose in their work and prioritizing that. And one of the questions I started asking myself was, at what point did people really feel that work and the work that they do lost meaning and purpose, and why is that? And I think that's an interesting one, and would definitely fall into this space of all of these different cultural shifts that happen over time that can lead people to. I've been reading a book called Bullshit Jobs, and all these people that are sort of writing into this guy when he was doing a paper of like absolutely my job does not need to exist, and if I disappeared today, like the world would not change one iota for it. And that then leads these people to this place of like they're desperately seeking meaning and purpose in their career, but then we need to then go a little bit deeper again to really understand what that is, because what are we chasing? So yeah, they're big questions, and that was also really interesting around looking for comforting and stimulating environments. Can you expand on that? Is there a scenario that someone might, if someone has found that, what's that look like? And I guess that's going to be different for everyone, but yeah.
Sure. Well, I guess to speak to it on the most nuanced level that I could, I guess I would use an example from my own career and business. So I guess what we're really talking about in this part of the conversation is our performance edge, right? If we're bringing the idea of holding two simultaneous truths and human beings needing two contrasting things simultaneously in work, which is both comfort as well as challenge, then we're talking about being on our performance edge, because that's about, moving out of your comfort zone, but not being too far outside your comfort zone that you're overwhelmed, your cognition is impacted. So I guess in running Superora, the company that I run here in Australia, I now feel we've got a really nice balance on our team between striving for big new things, because they're pretty innovative in what we do. Coolnomics is a whole new body of work, building out the methodology behind that, even funding the research and the building of that body of work is a challenge in itself. And I feel like we now have a really nice balance in our team, even in the way that we engage with one another, that we bring a certain amount of comfort in the fact that we can all really trust each other. There's a solidarity, there's a security. So we're going to talk human primal needs. Humans need to feel safe. Humans need to feel secure. Humans need to feel connected and that they belong to something. So I really feel like we've got that right now in Superora, that right. I feel like I can lean on my team and we can count on each other intellectually, psychologically, philosophically to be able to go wherever we need to go to move through the challenges. So you've got that nice base, and then also new ideas that are quite cutting edge, and also quite cutting edge for Australia. And also, even being a woman in this space has been an interesting thing to navigate, to be seen, to be on camera, to speak up, to bring your own ideas into the world, to talk about things like economics and politics is not that common, though we are seeing a huge influx, or again, a shift in the zeitgeist at the moment. Quite a lot of female thought leaders in the politics space, from your Hannah Ferguson's to your Abby Chatfields. It's interesting. A lot of them are women who are really big in the zeitgeist right now, talking about what's happening at the time. But to bring it back, that's an example of the ideas have their edge, and our striving and our ambition has the stimulation, the edge, the challenge, and is always pulling us out of our comfort zone and finding new levels of norms and comfort. But the only way to do that sustainably and to take the idea all the way, which we'll talk about later on, I now know that for me, I need people I can count on who are at the right kind of, who bring the right kind of culture with them. So I guess that's an example for you that
that
I
makes a
feel
lot
like
of
I'm really on
sense.
my performance edge now because of
Yeah,
that. Whereas
yeah,
before, I feel like I was too much out of my comfort zone all the time, always in the danger zone all the time, and it wasn't sustainable, and it wasn't very enjoyable, which means that I couldn't take it all the way. So for me now, I'm committed to having whatever components are necessary to have in the picture to take the idea all the way, because this is our creativity. This is what our
yeah.
careers are all about, right?
Mm. Yeah, I probably think of it as like the growth zone of like you're not like so under challenged that you're sort of stagnant, but you're not so overstressed that it's just like frying you and leading to burnout. When you find that neat little spot where you're just stretched and in a place of tension where you can then really be
Yeah,
productive. Um,
yeah,
and this is why I really wanted to have you on. I think you have this great unique perspective, having this artistic sort of background and internal, a very creative person. I can just tell from talking with you that you're a very creative person. And then you're in this economic space, which
yeah,
I am pretty sure wouldn't need to pick up too many books to realize that's been pretty historically dominated by men.
yeah,
And so then bringing this really unique angle and perspective to that, and making economics cool again, which is which is good. Yeah, so no, I think it's great to when people can start to bring these different angles to these things, and yeah, really excited to see where it all goes for you in as this. And it's an economic theory, right, that you're essentially developing, and
yeah.
will yeah, be out in the world to help inform people. Have you heard much about the is it the donut theory? Um,
Donut theory. That sounds
so
familiar. What is that one
yeah,
again?
so it's kind of like, because when you think about capitalism being highly driven by the need for continuous growth,
Mm,
whereas this was more so looking at the economy in a circle of things that need to sort of all sit within balance with one another, and not just economic growth, but the health of your population, the mental health, all of climate, environment, all these different factors all need to be considered together
yeah,
to have a more rounded picture of success, I guess, versus just a continuous growth that. And I think it was sort of looking at how most capitalist societies sort of hit a sort of plateau
yeah,
by way of more, and you can tell I'm not an economist, like continuous GDP growth doesn't
mm,
just keep equaling positive mental health and society outcomes, which up to a certain point it does. It's kind of like with an individual, if someone's earning $40,000 a year and they get a $20,000 pay rise, that is going to have huge positive impacts on their health and mental
yeah,
health, because it's getting them to a bracket where they can actually now get some of those more baseline needs met. But it's something about over $70,000, and maybe with
yes,
inflation you adjust that a little bit right now. Beyond that point, it's really not making that bigger of an impact on your mental health and stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're talking about donut economics. There's a couple of things in what you just said. That 70K a year concept, I believe, has been a little bit debunked, because I think we can all imagine that that is quite a reductive paradigm to say that people, because essentially, right, the hypothesis or the finding from that particular piece of research was that after, beyond earning $70,000 per year, people don't get any happier beyond that. That's a very reductionist way of it describing it. But I've read quite a lot and seen quite a lot that, I mean, there's so much nuance in that picture. But I think, but I think where you're going with this, that let's speak to this, is, and this is absolutely part of the aim of Coolnomics. Coolnomics is supposed to is a practical framework that we're using right now with our clients, and deploying its capability, and we're building it to the next level live in real time with our community. But also it's creating, hopefully over time, a space for us to, yes, talk about capitalism as an economic model and its limitations. And also, we're in late stage capitalism now through some economic lenses, which means, I spoke about this on our podcast 2 weeks ago, that capitalism isn't serving humanity very well. Capitalism is crushing humanity. Let's be real. Cost of living crisis, everything is tight and challenging. And now with these new tariffs, even more intense. So, and it's not a particularly equal model. We've got a whole bunch of people making a lot of money and a whole bunch of people who aren't. And the justice that, when we apply a justice lens to that, and a fairness lens. So, but as we know, it's not going to be a simple journey changing the major paradigmic model that a lot of the Western countries are existing within, that it's capital exchange. So that's why Coolnomics is looking at the relationship between capital, cultural capital, what is the thing, what is the energy, what is the presence, the identity around the thing that you're selling in the world, and how does that intersect with where the money is moving. I think this is a big, long tail conversation, Alex, isn't it? And I think we're all asking this question as well, that, hey, I don't know if this economy is really serving me very well. I don't know if I'm really enjoying this. And I mean, these are wicked problems, aren't they? But I think that's one of my hopes is, gosh, and we have this term that we use in Coolnomics quite a lot, Alex, which is, wouldn't it be cool if, right? Just start there. Don't start with the problems. Don't start with the limitations. Don't start with the norms or the status quo. Start with the very natural place that sort of question comes from. And one of the cool, wouldn't it be cool if questions I asked a few weeks ago was, wouldn't it be cool if capitalism served humanity rather than crushing it? So yeah, this is a big topic. But yeah, mate, there's some sticky bits. It's not working that well, which says to me, it's ripe for innovation. It's ripe for improvement. And the zeitgeist has moved on, and people are more conscious of economics and class and, topics like this now. It's a paradigmic time. I think we're going to see some shifts in the bigger model in the next 10 years, surely, to serve humanity better.
Yeah. I think, and when I get into this, where you start asking these wicked questions, because they're so broad and so big, and so many people have a part to play in it for it to move in any sort of direction. And that's where I think I've started thinking about, I guess, us as humans and our ability to connect with people that have differing views, and how it's just becoming more and more important as polarization gets, what feels like is getting worse and worse in terms of further and further apart in tribalization of views and stuff. The more that we can just take steps to try and identify and understand someone else's view that this feels totally violating of our own, the closer and the more that we can do that collectively, I think that creates the opportunity to then see those larger scale shifts. And it's sort of like this challenge of the time. We've got all this information and all this understanding, and the broader community has a broader understanding of some of these principles and different ideas and the different concepts and places that something could go.
Yeah.
That it sort of creates this opportunity and this challenge, because now you've got everyone with a very like, different ideas and everyone has their idea.
Yep.
How do we maybe all compromise our ideas a little bit to move somewhere that's a little bit better? So lots of shifting pieces that come into that.
I feel like surely that my sense, and it was also in our resonance report, in the Changing Intelligence Pulse, talking about the changes in public discourse and collective intelligence. So yes, we're seeing changes like that Jaguar rebrand, just for example, right? Jaguar had their big rebrand last year, and watching, I'm not here to talk about the rebrand itself, the actual piece of work, but what I was interested in through a behavioral lens was watching how people responded to it, how they crafted their social media responses, how the comment sections engaged with it. And it really showed, I think, all of us that, wow, as a society where there's a gap in our skill set. This is a technical skill set to be able to be in discourse with another human being, to engage critical thinking. You know what's funny, Alex? I hear people say a lot, what happened to critical thinking? Mate, I don't remember critical thinking ever being particularly well taught to the masses. Critical thinking is quite an elite kind of topic. When you say to someone critical thinking, tell me what is critical thinking, people can't actually even explain what that is. So, and I'm not criticizing anyone. I'm saying, hey, folks, I think there's a skill gap here, a technical skill gap quite broadly in our communities where people don't even know how to have a differing opinion. People don't know how to engage empathy and consider, okay, why? Because I see this a lot, right, in people who push back around, gender politics or body autonomy, some of the big political issues that are really with very deep division. If you watch a person talking about why they're anti something that someone else might be pro, there's a primal human reason that they have that opinion on either side, and it's generally about safety and security, and therefore not wanting anything new and challenging because their particular worldview is all they can cope with at that point in time. So I just think, again, I don't have the answers to these really big, wicked problems, over the next 10 years of Coolnomics. I hope for all of us to be finding these collective answers together. But I just think we shouldn't be underestimating that critical thinking and discourse are technical skill sets. People disagree with us, often for quite primal, deep human reasons, not just because we're wrong or because they don't like what we're saying in terms of its content. It's often what that thing represents, right? Like a final example would be if you're going to suddenly introduce different types of gender identity into a society that has quite broadly agreed that there's a binary between men and women, and we're suddenly going to, not suddenly, breaking through into the mainstream. Gender diversity has been part of human existence for as long as humans have been around. But to bring these topics into the foreground and then expect people to understand them, I think there's a bit of a gap there that you need to introduce even what is gender. You need to take people on that journey if you want to, if we want to collectively, bring the power of all of our thinking together and build our collective intelligence as one. There's some of my thoughts on that, that particular topic. Yeah.
And this sort of brings us to this thing, like there's all these big things. And when we got chatting, we were talking about what does it look like to actually see an idea through? And we're grappling with that. And you've gone away and had a bit of a think of that. How do we see an idea through when we're in our workplace or we're just living our lives and we start to formulate an idea and we want to see it go out into the world, and then of course we mention it to the first person that we think to, and then they say that sounds stupid and knock it on the head, and then you have a decision to make. Oh, is it stupid? Is this something I walk away from, or is this something that I actually believe in and I need to find a way to build it out and take it out and work through adversity and help people understand it? How can someone do that in their career, in their life?
Sure. Well, I guess we think of examples where someone's hoping to introduce a new idea into the way their team works, or a new idea for their marketing team that might be a little bit challenging. Or I guess it makes me think of when I was at Sydney's QVB and I was given the opportunity to transform their brand, their technology, and their product. The QVB is a big 125-year-old heritage listed building in Sydney. It's also a luxury retail precinct, and that was such an interesting example of. I took it in 3 phases, and I've applied this across my career, but I'm just using an example in a corporate setting for someone who might have a corporate job, and then we could apply that to how an entrepreneur might interpret it. the first step, the objective in that case was we want to grow revenue and become more relevant. Again, those two things go together. If you want to make more money, you need to be relevant to the people that you're selling to. It's such a basic sort of thing. It's a real magical journey to get all of that right, but it is a simple equation. So step one is get a sense for what does society, the community, the market, the people, or even if you're selling an idea or wanting buy-in from an idea from the leadership team, get a sense of what is going on for them. Where are the sticky points in society? Where is society moving? What's going on with culture, politics, the environment, etc.? What's mattering to people? That's the sensing. Step two, shape. So strategy. Putting some shape and some structure to how this sense that you're getting, put some shape around that sense, turn it into something. It could be a new product idea, it could be a strategy that you're looking to lead, but put some actual shape around it and bring a little bit of commercial nous into it is what I would say as well. It's one thing to have a nice feel for something that would be cool, but when we're in a business setting and when we're being leaders breaking new ground, we have to understand what are the economic implications? Where would the funding come from for this? Or how much money do we think this might be able to make? How valuable is this? And by applying an economic lens, it also, I've found, makes our ideas much stronger. It acts almost like a molding action on the clay that we've got in front of us. We've got a sense of something that might be cool, and that by applying strategy, it makes us consider, how would this look? In what sequence? How much money would be required to get this idea off the ground? What would be happening also across our teams? What's going to go on with operations, brand, technology, resourcing, etc. And then finally, it's around scale. So thinking about what could we do to take this idea even further to have even greater impact. So when I'm selling an idea or working, if back when I was working in a corporate setting, when I was selling an idea, or now when I work with clients and I'm helping them develop and sell their ideas to both their boards and executive teams as well as to a market, they're the three phases that I'm always moving through, getting a sense for what is going on in the world relevant to that particular business or industry or sector. All right, what would be the shape of how we might deploy this idea and in what sequence? You want to always be making sure you're getting A correct, which will unlock B and C. You always want to work on a compounding approach, and that's why you might take a 1 year or a 5 year view on your idea to consider, okay, it might not be about a big bang in the market in one moment. It's about building up to gaining more traction. So everything you're doing is aligning to your ultimate success. And then finally, how it can scale and how you can take that idea all the way, which again, thinking in a multi-year manner can help with that. So they're the three phases that I'm always moving, and also moving back and forth, right? What's the sense? What's the strategy? What's the scale? What's the sense? What's the strategy? What's the scale? And oscillating between the three become like a carving approach, I find.
Yeah.
And shopping your ideas around and presenting them to people, you get to then feed in the data of, okay, that bit didn't quite make sense for them, or no, that bit didn't feel so robust or solid. It's up to you to figure out how to refine that and get it right, to get the right people on board so you can take the idea all the way.
Yeah, I love it. And I love the starting with the sense. Like, that intuition that you have is often going to be, it's telling you something. And I'm not necessarily going to say it's often right, but for argument's sake, let's say your sense is often right, but then you need to take it out and you need to test it, or like draw in more information. And maybe that's where you go into the more analytical stage of bringing in the data and the information.
Yep.
But then you bring it back to the sense. Okay, how does this sit with the sense? Because you're not necessarily looking to change the sense. You're looking to sort of build out that sense.
Yeah.
And because I was listening to a education philosopher that was sort of talking about that. He's like, start with your sense. You go out, you get the information, you bring it back, and you bring it back to the sense. Because you get bogged down into the strategy, then all of a sudden you don't go back to the sense.
Yep.
All of a sudden, in your attempts to make the sense work, you've drifted away from it. And now all of a sudden, what you're trying to do isn't quite what it was. And now all of a sudden you're like, oh, so why am I doing that? And it's like, oh, I've completely moved away from the whole purpose of why I was even trying to do it,
Mm.
And so, yeah, definitely that continuous moving back and forth between those stages is an important part for people not to forget. You get onto an idea and then you invest some time. It's the whole sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
You get so invested in it, you don't want to turn around now because you don't want to look like a failure, or all the people that are going to turn around and go, oh yeah, I told you it wasn't going to work, and so you dig your heels in and you get stubborn.
Yeah. And it's also a practice as well, Alex, isn't it? Like back in the day, I had a certain skill level in combining logic with instinct. And now 20 years later, having done it a million times, having failed, having succeeded, and everything in between, also having worked with a bunch of different people and seen how they've done it in their own way as well, is training quite a deep. I mean, this is the alchemy, this is the magic bit where really cool ideas come from. That's our instinct. But again, just working with instinct wouldn't take the idea all the way, wouldn't get people to buy into it. And also, I think the idea is only half baked if it's only based on instinct. You then apply strategy and economic considerations and data, yes, to work out. It's almost like an aperture, like we're focusing the lens more and more until we get really tight. Boom, that's the bit. Think about Stanley Cups with emotional support water bottle. That was a combination of logic and magic. That there was the zeitgeist back then a couple of years ago, women talking about their trauma on healing journeys. And also this aesthetic value, very interesting lands itself in this space where you have behavior and product in the same picture. And it's ridiculous. Yes, that is the whole point. A giant colorful water bottle with items hanging off it, calling it your emotional support water bottle. Yeah, that's ridiculous. That's the whole point. The world is ridiculous. Human beings are looking for comfort in their water bottles, of course. So I just would also encourage that in people as well, to bring some edge into your thinking. It's an edgy world. It's a volatile zeitgeist. Absurdity and humor, and this real self-aware kind of humor, I think, is really relevant right now. People aren't stupid. They want to be spoken to and entertained and seen for who they really are. Again, in this combination of items. Can't be too sentimental, can't be too deep, can't be too edgy. Oh, it's that magic, isn't it? Where it all has everything's balanced in the right way.
Have you seen the SNL skit of the Stanley Cups?
I don't know if I actually have. I can't believe I haven't. But what is it again? What do they...
They're like, they're sort of doing this skit where they're like, oh, big dumb cup. And then it's like, and then there's like three of them, and then the cups are getting bigger and bigger, and eventually they're
sure, like, right, yes. I've seen TikTok trends of that, which of course, a guy carrying around a stool with him, like it's a drink bottle. It's memeable. Yeah, but it's only memeable because the idea is deep. That idea is deep. Emotional support water bottle, that is connecting to a very deep, very raw part of the zeitgeist. Literally the fact that people now talk about their trauma in a way that they never did before. The fact that we've raised our literacy in terms of mental health and how it works. How wild that you can draw a line between that shift in a very deep psychological and sociological way finds its way in a colourful, ridiculous, accessorized drink bottle. But that's Coolnomics. That's how you do it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Robyn, thank you so much for being on today. How can people find you, follow on with what you're doing? You've mentioned your podcast. How can people get in touch?
Sure. I guess going to superora.co, we might add a link to make it easy for people, would be the easiest way. That's where you'll find the podcast, what we do as a strategy studio, and the body of work that is Coolnomics. Check out the resonance report for this year. There's some really interesting ideas that we've touched on in terms of what's happening in Australia with culture and economics. But superora.co is the base to find everything that you need. Yeah, thanks, Alex.
Wonderful. Thanks, Robyn. Thanks for tuning in to Kinda Planned. Subscribe and send this episode to a friend that you think needs to hear it. Or head to my website, www.kindaplan.com.au for free resources. Or follow me on LinkedIn and socials so that we can keep the conversation going. Now go unlock your next opportunity.